Okay, another half-hour spot interviewing Robert Nelson about his life and times. This is July 31st. Just turned 31st. It's just after midnight. And we're going to pick up where we left before. This is session number 3. And it's part 5.
Part 5?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Should I start?
Yep.
Okay. When we left off, we were discussing that I had joined different groups and was doing healing work and psychic readings, things of that nature, in the 1970s, early 70s. Excuse me. I went through college, 4 years of college. Got my AA degree first and then my BA degree. The degree was in, let me put it this way, I majored in German, minored in French, and I sort of minored in education. But then I did some substitute work in elementary education, loved it, and decided to go back for some more classes to certify me in elementary ed. And then began teaching after that in one of the schools north of the city where I lived. During all this time, I was still going to the various metaphysics groups, as well as to Unity Church, sometimes the Unitarian Church as well. And there was also a Church of Religious Science in the city where I lived, and I went to that from time to time. Other than that, I was going to Tampa, Orlando, and all over Central Florida, doing teaching work at times in the realms of spirituality and metaphysics. I totally loved it. It was a great chance to meet a lot of people, and again, the healing work continued. I know in one case, there was a woman who was attending the Unitarian Church one evening that I was there, and she was limping around and had her ankle wrapped up in an ace bandage. They're also called figure 8 bandages, I think. She had a sprained ankle, really bad, swollen. So she sat on the hood of her car and she asked, could I please help her? So I said, sure. And I went over and I put my hands in the air around her ankle. Again, I never touched her ankle. And all of a sudden, the ace bandage unwrapped itself, hit the ground, and her ankle was back to normal size. She got up and danced around on it, was doing great.
Wow.
Again, thank God. And when I say thank God, I'm thanking God her, thank God me. Because we share it. Healing is always shared. And the person who's, quote, doing the healing, unquote, feels the sense of healing as it's happening for the other person too. So it's truly shared. It's wonderful. In another case, I was attending the Unity Church in the same city, and this one evening, this elderly woman was being helped in. She, poor soul, she had gone through surgeries for both her knees. Apparently they didn't take too well, it didn't work too well. Both knees were again wrapped in ace bandages. Her relatives were holding her under her arms and on each side of her and helping her to come into the church and sit down. It was a Wednesday night church service in Unity, and they asked me afterwards, could I please come help their great aunt? And I said I'd be glad to. So I pulled up one of the chairs, turned it around, sat in front of her, and let's say her knees were here. I put my hands outside in the airspace near her knees. And just like with the woman with the sprained ankle, all of a sudden, both figure 8 bandages, or we'll go with that for now, the ace bandages unwrapped themselves and hit the floor, and her knees weren't swollen anymore. She got up and walked out of the church on her own power.
All right.
And she wasn't in pain. Again, thank God. So there were just different types of healing, some dealing with cancer even. Got wonderful results. Then there was another issue going on, and that was readings I was doing right and left. I would go to metaphysics meetings. People would ask for readings. Okay, fine, no problem. But it got to where it went a little too far. I found that I'd come home from work in the afternoons after teaching. The phone would be ringing. Can you tell me if I'm going to meet Mr. Wright or Miss Wright or whatever? Can you tell me if I'm going to work the stock market and be able to, you fill in the blank from there. And usually it was the same questions from the same people week after week or month after month. And I would ask them, what have you done to change the situation since I first spoke with you? Nothing. And you're expecting a different answer and a different reading? It's not going to happen. After a while, I mean, literally, I would come home from work, answer the phone, talk on the phone for an hour and a half. I would fix supper, have to gulp it down in a hurry, because the phone would ring again, and then I'd be doing another reading, right as I was trying to get ready to go out and go to one of my metaphysics organizations. I was actually out 7 nights a week, every night. In fact, I had invitations I couldn't make.
Wow.
But it was a time when I was really on the go. I was doing some good. I loved what I was doing. I was doing counseling work with people. No, I'm not a counselor. I'm a friend. I don't think you have to be a licensed counselor to be a friend.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to say I was doing spiritual guidance, spiritual counseling, fine. But the readings got to the point where I didn't have any time to myself at all. If I was in the middle of something I was trying to get done, the phone would ring.
Yeah.
And I would feel guilty if I didn't, perform the service of a psychic. After a while, I felt like everybody's ever-loving little psychic answer man. And I knew that's not what I was here for, and that I was living their lives for them, instead of letting them live their lives.
And it wasn't like you were charging for it at all either.
No, I was doing it for free. And the psychic work that I do, whether it's channeling or readings or anything of that nature, is just a byproduct of who I am. It's not what I'm about.
Yeah.
There are plenty of psychics who can do that.
Yeah.
And some of them are good ones and some of them aren't. So finally, I stopped doing a lot of those readings. I let people know why. And I'd hear, oh, Bob. And then these good friends of mine, I'd never hear from them again. But it got to the point where I was on the go constantly and thoroughly enjoying it. I really was. And I was still involved with Michael, the Archangel. I remember in 1972.
This is after college?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Actually, 1973. Yeah, it was after college. I was teaching by then. One evening I was talking with my mom about the Archangel Michael, and she got fed up hearing about him, and I don't blame her. I talked quite a bit about him back then. And she finally said, oh yeah, well, this is Michael. He can fly. He can do this. He can do that. And I sat there thinking, well, if you can't understand what's going on here, then how can I hope for anybody else to?
Yeah.
I went on back over to the cottage. I lived in the mother-in-law cottage behind my parents' house. And I had to answer the phone for another reading that needed to be done.
So, excuse me, I'm not sure exactly what you're saying. Are you saying that she didn't believe in Michael, or?
Oh, she believed in him.
Well,
she just got tired of hearing about him, because I talked about him really for a while incessantly.
Oh, okay.
She called me up the next morning. She sounded like she'd been crying. And I said, what's going on? She said, I need you to come over here now, please. And I did. I tried to find out why over the phone. She was too upset to talk. She said, come over here now, please. So I did. Went back into the den of the house, and she was sitting in one of the chairs there. She had been crying. She said, I need you to promise me something. I said, sure, what? She said, when we're through talking, I want you to go back to the cottage and meditate, pray, do whatever you have to, however you get in touch with Michael, and apologize to him for me. I said, why? And she said, I got maybe 10 minutes sleep last night.
Uh-huh.
She said, I had this dream. I just fell asleep and had this dream where I saw Michael standing in a temple of white marble and white marble pillars. And he was standing head and shoulders above the people who were in a big group around him, and they were asking questions, and he was answering them right and left. Then he saw me. He turned his back to me and walked out of the temple. And she said, I heard his boots clicking on the floor, on the marble floor.
Uh-huh.
And as he turned, and the last thing I saw him as he went down the last step of the temple, she said, all of a sudden my feet itched so badly I couldn't sleep. It woke me up, and I didn't sleep all night the rest of the night.
Mm-hmm.
She said, please, I'm begging you, apologize to him for me, please.
Uh-huh.
And I said, Mom, I don't think he'd do anything to you. I don't care, apologize. And I said, yes, I promised I'd do it, that's what I'll do. I went back to the cottage, sat down and meditated, and all of a sudden I'm out of my body, and I'm looking down on earth, and I'm looking then out past the curve of the earth, and Michael is out in space, letting go of a very big, weird oblong-shaped object. Didn't make any sense to me. But I did say, wait a minute, what are you letting go over my planet? What are you letting go over my Earth? And then he said, well, let's just say and the scene changed like that. And we were standing in a kitchen that I didn't recognize, a small kitchen, modern. And he was holding a frying pan with some weird-looking bacon that didn't look like real bacon. And wearing a buckskin jacket with fringe, like was very popular back in the 60s and 70s.
Uh-huh.
And his next words were, cooking something up. Put it together, let's just say I'm cooking something up.
Yeah.
Well, at that point I said, wait a minute, my mom is in tears because she didn't sleep last night after a dream she had about you. And I said, she wants me to beg you, well, she wanted me to apologize to you for how she acted about you.
Uh-huh.
And I said, but now, okay, I've extended that apology to you. I did what I promised my mom I would do, but I said, where do you get off doing anything to hurt my mom? I said, you have to answer to me for that.
Uh-huh.
And he did. He said, I didn't do anything to her. He said, this is a biological issue. I had nothing to do with it, which we found out later on. It was diabetic nerve pain in her feet that was causing the itching. This weird oblong thing that he was letting go of in space, I recognized it finally in 1975. It was the docking system between the Russian Soyuz and the American Apollo docking capsules. The handshake in space is what it was called.
Uh-huh.
The frying pan full of weird-looking bacon is the exact kind of bacon I was eating. It was like I'm going to go ahead and use a product name, Morningstar. It was a soy bacon.
Yeah.
I was trying to lose weight at that time, not that it would show now. But that's the kind of bacon that I actually was cooking with.
Uh-huh.
In 1976, when I moved into an apartment not far from where I lived, I just wanted to get away from my folks a bit. I mean, no real reason, I just wanted to be more on my own. And the kitchen was the same kitchen in that apartment. Exact same kitchen. Now, I'm going to jump a little forward and then come backward. Another strange thing about that kitchen, and this is a tie-in, in 1976, when I was living there, in November of that year, Michael told me to go through a baptism, to be rebaptized. I think I spoke about this in a previous session, but just in case I didn't, I argued. I said I was baptized when I was 6. There's no reason for me to have to do that again. To which he said, no. He said, you have to do this in order to begin your work here, just like you did 2,000 years ago. And I said, okay, where do we go from here? He said, you will be baptized by your cousin, a minister from up north, who will be visiting his family for Christmas. You will be baptized on the 24th of December, Christmas Eve day, in 30-degree temperature in a consecrated swimming pool, consecrated for baptism. And he said, and if you have more trouble believing me, it will snow in Florida. It will be so cold the snow will stick on the ground this winter. To which I thought, oh, you know, I not only argued, I stopped arguing thinking bullshit, 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 because I knew my cousin was not going to be coming down to visit his family.
Yeah.
He had already told him he wouldn't be able to. A few days later, he contacts his mom, saying, my mom's sister, saying that he would be able to come down after all. The minister, apparently the main minister of the church where he was a youth minister, was going to, I guess, stay there instead of taking off like he was going to do for the Christmas vacation, Christmas days. And my cousin was going to be able to come visit his family in Florida after all. And then I'm thinking to myself at that point, OMG. Only I said the words. Oh my God. Well, I had my mom contact her sister, my cousin's mom, and tell him that I wanted to be baptized. He then came to visit me one day after he made it down to Florida for the Christmas break. And he said, okay, I'm going to baptize you on the 24th. He said, now, before I left, there was a family I knew who had a swimming pool built, and it was especially consecrated for baptism. I was baptized on December 24th of the year 76, in 30-degree weather. It was 30-degree weather, in an unheated swimming pool, full immersion baptism. When I was dunked under the water, I felt total warmth all over my body. I shouldn't have.
Yeah.
There was this golden white light all around me. And I remember thinking two things. One, this is where I'm accepting that which I'm about and will have to be progressing to. Two, I hope Bill doesn't try to drown me. He and I didn't always get along on things.
Yeah.
Anyway, at any rate, no, he didn't. He brought me back out of the water fine. But that January, still part of winter in Florida, it got so cold, it got down into the 20s and even into the teens. It snowed one night and morning, and the snow stuck on the ground and car bumpers and everything for 3 days in a row. Everything he said came true.
Yeah.
Point for point for point for point for point. And for people who ever say, well, do you think he's really Michael? Or is he something evil? Well, if he was evil, he wouldn't be telling me to go be baptized.
Yeah.
That's simple. There was another instance with him where I was meditating one evening, and he came to me and said, my soul overshadows you, and my wings protect you. And as he can be cryptic at times, I said, yeah, whoopee, great, that's very cryptic, now explain. And he said, just remember what I said. Next day on my way home from work, it was a Friday afternoon, I had been teaching school, and a couple of the teachers who had gone to work that day with other rides, their rides got sick with the flu, so they needed another ride back. Me. On our way back, this pickup truck sideswipes me. I'm in a little Toyota Corolla.
Yeah.
My first car. I tried to steer the car where I got up on the little island way in the middle of the road, but I still got hit. No one was hurt. I did put in a claim to the insurance company. I got home, started to relax, calm down, meditated, and Michael came back to me. He said, now you know what I meant. My mom calls me a little later and says, you know, you should call your insurer and tell them you don't need them. I said, why? She said, well, I just washed off the tire marks. The paint's not damaged even.
Wow.
No damage to your car at all.
That's right. I remember you telling me that years ago.
So he's pretty effective. So am I. But he is my teacher, Michael is, in this life, and he was 2,000 years ago. And he was when I was Zoroaster, about 3,000 years ago.
Yeah. Well, he's actually an aspect of your soul that never leaves the realm of heaven, if you will.
Right.
And there's aspersions to that in the Bible, actually, right? You want to mention that at this time?
Oh, not at this point. No.
Okay.
He actually made a statement one evening when he was channeling through me to a friend. He stated that he had walked the green Chaldean hills. The Chaldean hills are in the Middle East. They haven't been green for a very long time.
Yeah, all right.
So this is a little sample of what was going on in the early 70s.
Uh-huh.
Now, to my mom's disgust, I guess, I began taking flying lessons in the mid to late 70s. I met a friend one time at an Edgar Casey meeting who, when he used to take me flying, and I loved the experience, one evening he looked over at me and I began picking up words he was thinking. I said, hold it, whoa. In fact, his name was Paul. That's all I'm going to say on that. I'm not going to give his last name. I said, you just called me a Messiah. And he said, yeah, that's right. How'd you know? I said, you think I'm a Messiah? And he said, yeah. Anyway, we went flying a number of times. I really loved the feeling of flying, so I decided to take flight lessons. And there's so much weird stuff I could tell you, but due to time interest, we'll just hit a few high spots and that's it. In one of the sessions of flight time, I was doing what they call touch and goes. That's where you land and take off, land and take off. You practice landings. You're going to land one way or another. You want to make it as soft and nice as possible, as safe as possible.
Yeah.
And so this one afternoon in February, it was very windy, and I was shooting touch and goes. Or doing touch and goes. Now, the runway was a grassed-in airstrip just south of the city where I lived, and it was half torn up, the length of the runway. It was going to be resodded, so there's dirt, and then there's grass. I had to put the nose gear of the plane on the edge of the grass right next to the dirt.
Mm-hmm.
Power lines and fence to my left, I couldn't go that direction, and there was dirt.
Yeah.
If I had landed in the dirt, I probably would have been dead, seriously.
What, the dirt was where it used to be paved? Were they repaving it?
It was where it used to be grassed in. They dug up the grass.
But I mean, where's like the asphalt landing strip?
It wasn't. It was a grassed-in airport.
It was a grass landing
Yeah.
for the. All right.
Yeah. So, anyway, here I'm shooting touch and goes on this very windy day. I go into the FBO or Flight Bureau office, and there's this tall, slender gentleman, elderly gentleman, who says, "You're the one who's been doing touch and goes out there?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" I felt kind of defensive, like, what did I do wrong? And he said, "If you can do that with the headwind and side winds and half a torn up runway," he said, "you could land planes on the deck of an aircraft carrier." To which I said, "Yeah, in my last life I did. I flew Army planes for the Navy. I was a naval aviator, but we had to use Army planes because of the attack on Pearl Harbor."
Uh-huh.
And he looked at me, "Huh?" And I said, "Yeah, it's true." Left it like that. In another situation, same location, same airstrip, before it was torn up, my instructor and I are sitting in the plane, coming into land, losing airspeed, and all of a sudden I notice there's a truck half on the runway.
Uh-huh.
It was the same color as the ground from the air.
Yeah.
Old rusty pickup. Brown and green. Rust brown green. And it really was rusty. But they were the people who were going to see about tearing up the runway so it could be resodded.
Uh-huh.
Well, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, something told me, bounce the plane. I didn't know what that meant, but I just instinctively started pulling back and forth on the wheel.
Yeah.
And I shoved what they call the carburetor heat valve back in, which reignited the engine, and I twisted left.
Yeah.
So here's the windshield of the truck. The right wing of my plane missed the windshield of the truck 8 inches all the way up the truck.
Wow.
The people who had just gotten in it were down like that. Yeah. My instructor is sitting there with his handlebar mustache. We got about 800 feet up, and I said, "Pardon me for what I'm going to say, please. Well, what in the hell was that goddamn truck doing on the goddamn runway in the first place?" And he's, Then he calmly says, "Okay, go back around, put it down, and come land and go on. Yep, you're doing fine." I didn't feel fine. I felt pretty upset.
Yeah.
But I tell people I almost hit a truck with a plane one time. They said, "Was it flying?" There were a lot of interesting things that happened, one of which I got the chance to go to different air shows all over Central Florida. That was a lot of fun. It was great. I got to fly in different planes I never would have had the chance to, like a biplane. It was, oh gosh, I didn't pilot it, but I got to fly in it. So graceful. In one of these air shows, we had spent the day out watching everybody, come in and show off their planes, basically. Then we had gone over to a restaurant nearby. I think it was near Apopka, Florida. And my friend, same name of Paul, and his girlfriend, his lady friend, had gone to the restaurant. I went with them. We were getting ready to pay out. Paul had gone to the restroom, the men's room. Now, on the wall, to what would have been my left at that moment, there were these copper peacock design artworks. They were beautiful. They were really pretty. Three-dimensional effect of the neck and head of the peacock coming out with like tail feathers fanned out on the wall flat with staining, the staining of the metal of the copper so it looked like peacock tail feathers. There were two of them, one eye level, one a little higher. Well, I was teasing his girlfriend, who knew I was into psychism of different types, and I said, "Hey," and I wasn't even watching what I was doing. Like the Geller effect. She does one of these numbers. And I thought she was kidding. I started laughing, and she wasn't laughing.
Yeah.
And I said, "What?" And she does this. I turned and looked. Every other feather was bent out into the room. They didn't just gradually bend out. They went from being flat along the wall to different all of a sudden, like in a split second.
Yeah.
I began learning a little more of what I could do. One afternoon, I was fortunate enough to go to a fly-in picnic. They call them fly-ins. Instead of sit-ins, fly-ins.
Yeah.
And we could see a thunderstorm coming across the field toward us. It was in Winter Haven, Florida, the Fair Airstrip. We had just sat down to eat. So I said, "Hey God, how about giving us 30 minutes before it lets loose so we can eat our meal, okay?" And people were looking down the table at me. And my friend Paul says, he really does have it in with God. And he gets results. Well, sure enough, the rain stopped. I mean, it was still raining, but it didn't come towards us. 30 minutes later to the minute, and people checked their watches. We got downpoured. We rushed into the closest hangar. Thunder and lightning like you wouldn't believe. Black sky. Wind whipping the rain sideways. The hangar made it like an echo chamber. I was getting a headache because of the constant sound. So I went to the door of the hangar and I'm looking out at the sky. Kind of pissed off. This older pilot comes up to me. I didn't know him. He didn't know me. And he says, "Well, what do you think of our Florida thunderstorm, Sonny?" And I looked over at him and said, "I wish it'd stop. I hated it. I wish it'd stop now." Like you turned off a switch.
Yeah.
The rain didn't slack up. It stopped. The thunder didn't just kind of tone down. It completely stopped. There was no wind, no rain, no thunder. Nice and quiet. I liked it that way. My friend comes over to me, looking at me under his eyebrows. What did you do? And I said, well, I had a headache, so I decided to do something about it. Put it back. And I said, no, I don't want it put back. Put it back. You don't know what change you made on other parts of the world by changing the weather here. It's that concept that if a butterfly farts on Earth, it might make an earthquake on Mars. Rather extreme, I know. But you get the meaning.
Look at all the butterfly effect.
Difficultly. So I went ahead grudgingly. Went back to the doorway and I said, okay, God, put it back to the way it was. And it started with a vengeance again. I found out that I had some influence over the weather. What I had a brief experience with when I was around 10 years old, trying to clear the skies one night to go to the state fair. There were so many things that happened. I was still doing healing work with people and loving it. I remember meeting a girl at an airport, Tampa, one time during that period of time, and her wrist was in a cast. And I asked her what happened. She said she broke it in a fight, and that it was really hurting her. And I said, well, would you like some help with that? She said, can you do that? And I said, yeah, we sure can. And I meant we, her and me. And I just held my hand in the air over her wrist. And she said, what do you do? The pain stopped. And I said, it's called healing. So, I, in 1976, went through a born-again experience. That was part of the baptism that I went through. And for about 6 months, I could actually convince myself to turn my back on who I am. That felt good. You know, you would think, oh, if you're a Christ, wouldn't it be wonderful and wouldn't it da-da-da-da-da? No, not necessarily. Remember, I just wanted to be a normal person. Don't have that option in this life. But about a half a year later, I began plowing back into psychism and metaphysics. And knowing that that was byproduct, part of what I was here about. Well, metaphysics is a tool. Psychism is a tool. Telepathy, prophecy, these are all tools. They never should become the master. And while I applaud people trying to find out more about themselves, you never get to the point, you never let yourself get to the point where